The martial arts manual has been stolen, and the culprit is undoubtedly the demon sect. Within 3 days, this news spread like wildfire through the martial arts gossip, reaching everyone's ears, including Emily's at Tianma Mountain. Emily dropped the only bun she had, which rolled all the way out into the muddy ground outside. Emily was the right protector of the demon sect. Though the title sounded prestigious and awe-inspiring, the reality was that the demon sect had long since fallen apart. Even the leader had defected to the righteous faction, willingly starting over as a menial worker. Now, only 2 people remained on Tianma Mountain, Emily and...
Master, I'm hungry.
Yes, the other one was her foolish disciple. Look at this. Which heartless thief would dare to throw such dirty water on this pair of master and disciple who depended on each other? It's simply outrageous. Following the principle of a child won't starve from missing one meal, Emily chose to ignore John's words.
Master, I haven't eaten for 3 days.
Emily sighed and relented.
All right, come down the mountain with me.
In the noodle shop, John finally let out a satisfied burp after finishing the last sip of noodle soup.
Are you full?
Receiving an affirmative answer, Emily sprang to her feet.
If you're full, then run!
In a flash, Emily dashed out of the door like the wind, disappearing in an instant. Truly, she had inherited the best of the demon sect's escape skills. When she found John again, he was seeing stars, his handsome face bruised and battered.
Come on, I'll take you to get some healing medicine.
The boy didn't move.
I've already taught you the secrets of escaping, yet you still get caught every time. You can't blame me for that.
Master.
All right, next time I'll definitely take you with me. I won't leave you behind again, okay?
Only then did John break into a smile, hooking his finger around Emily's.
It's a promise.
The demon sect was doomed. A month later, when the righteous faction surrounded Tianma Mountain, Emily kicked open the door, finding John waiting outside with a large bundle on his back.
Master, I've packed our things. Let's hurry and escape.
The boy clutched Emily's sleeve, his eyes showing no fear. The main path down the mountain was blocked, so they planned to take a small path down the back. Just as they leaped onto the roof, the righteous faction caught up. John, not skilled in martial arts, barely managed to hang onto the eaves with one hand, his legs dangling in the air.
Foolish disciple, drop the bundle!
I won't. Those are Master's things, and the things Master gave me. I won't drop them.
The martial artists were closing in from behind. If they didn't leave now, there would be no chance. Emily glanced at the struggling John, gritted her teeth, and struck his abdomen. He fell straight from the eaves, unable to resist. The shock and despair in his eyes were heart-wrenching, but he spoke each word clearly.
Master, you promised you wouldn't leave me behind again. You lied to me.
3 years later.
Madam, I see your face is rosy, but your eyes are dark. Let me tell your fortune to avert disaster. It's not much, just 5 taels of silver.
A basin of cold water was poured over the Taoist's head. Mrs. Smith cursed.
You fraud, get lost.
The cold water dripped down the old Taoist's face, taking his small mustache with it. Emily licked her lips and reattached the mustache, puzzled.
Strange, yesterday everyone was clamoring for me to tell their fortune. How come there's not a soul today?
As she wondered, a copy of the martial arts gossip slapped onto her face. She pulled it off and her eyes lit up. The martial arts world was hosting a hidden weapons competition, with 1,000 taels of gold for the winner.
Hidden weapons! This is practically tailor-made for me. Who in the righteous factions could surpass the demonic cult in hidden weapon skills?
In the first round of the competition, a graceful young man stood poised, his appearance top-notch. He carried no sword, only a folding fan. His opponent was an ugly man, thin but rugged, with a scar running through his left eye, looking like a villain.
Master, you really came.
Pretty boy, look carefully. Who's your master?
3 years apart, and master won't even acknowledge his disciple. It's truly heartbreaking.
The man turned and dove into the crowd, disappearing in an instant. John sneered, his figure darting out, sticking close to the man like a cat playing with a mouse.
I told you, you've got the wrong person.
John's eyes grew even darker. He suddenly accelerated, grabbing the man's neck and lifting him, suspending him over the eaves. The man struggled, his headscarf falling off, revealing long black hair. John's sneer deepened as he tore off the man's mustache, revealing a familiar delicate face.
How did you recognize me?
In just 3 years, master has forgotten what you did to your disciple. Don't worry, even if you turn to ashes, I'll recognize you.
Emily's heart sank. Given the current situation, no amount of master-disciple sentiment could change his mind. Falling into his hands, her life was truly in danger.
5 years together, 3 years apart, and master runs at the sight of me. Do you not miss your disciple at all?
I do.
Michael hesitated, his eyes flickering. He snorted and released his grip. Emily was locked in the dungeon of the Martial Alliance. If there was one place demonic cult members were familiar with, it was this dungeon. Having been there many times, she had countless ways to escape. Emily wasn't worried at all. She lounged with her legs crossed, planning to escape once she was well fed and rested. Today, the person delivering her meal seemed different. Emily squinted and found the face somewhat familiar.
You're the leader?
Keep it down, will you? I'm no longer the demonic cult leader.
How did you end up as a guard?
Thanks to Handsome John, who figured only a demonic cult member could keep an eye on another. So, he transferred me here. I should thank you.
So, I can't escape?
Absolutely not.
Emily's heart sank. The leader had taught her everything. With just a glance, he knew what poison she'd use, which dart she'd throw, and which route she'd take to escape. Night fell, and Emily hadn't been idle. She tried over 10 escape methods, all ending in failure. She lay on the stone bed, unable to sleep, when she heard footsteps approaching. She quickly pretended to be asleep. When the iron door opened, she started mumbling in her sleep.
My dear disciple, it's all Master's fault. You can hit me, scold me. What? You forgive me? Master is so touched. From now on, I'll treat you well.
No response. Emily peeked through half-closed eyes and nearly fell off the bed in fright. Standing before her was the renowned George. He bowed to Emily.
3 years ago, I owe you my thanks for your help.
3 years ago, when Emily escaped, she struck John off the roof. Surrounded, the desperate boy remembered his master's mantra: if you can't win, run; if you can't run, beg; if begging fails, call for your father. Without thinking, John, who had been with Emily for so long, instinctively knelt before the leader.
Father.
The call wasn't in vain. George, tears streaming, said,
Is it really you, my son?
By a twist of fate, George's kidnapped son, missing for 5 years, was found.
Emily could have taken my son hostage to escape, but instead struck him down, clearing his name and reuniting us.
George, you've got it wrong. I'm just a petty thief. I only did it because dragging a burden was too troublesome.
George muttered to himself for a while before leaving. Not long after, more footsteps approached. Emily repeated her act, but this time, a long whip lashed out. If not for her quick reflexes, she would have been scarred. This time, it wasn't John but a gorgeous woman. The whip forced Emily to dodge around the cell like a mouse. After venting and issuing a warning, the woman glared at Emily and left. Disheveled, Emily kicked the stone bed, cursing.
Stupid disciple! Getting into trouble and making me take the blame. I'll stomp you to death.
Turning around, she almost fainted. John was standing in the cell, arms crossed, watching her with a smirk. Feeling wronged, Emily cried and hugged his leg.
Please, disciple, let me explain.
Go ahead.
Emily was taken aback by John's willingness to listen.
Well, it's a long story.
Master, are you so unwilling to talk to your disciple now?
John seemed angered, grabbing Emily's collar. The poor quality prison clothes tore, revealing her fair skin, making John blush. He turned to leave, but Emily, thinking he was leaving in anger, jumped on him, clinging tightly.
Please, my dear disciple, it's not what you think.
Let go of me!
Forgive me.
John finally broke free, but as he left, he threw his cloak over Emily, stumbling and hitting his head on the iron bars. In the evening, the leader brought dinner as usual.
This is good. It tastes like my stupid disciple's cooking. Did you make it?
Before the leader could respond, something banged against the iron bars.
What's that?
Just a rat. Nothing to see.
The next day, Emily was shocked to see John.
Stupid disciple, what happened to your forehead? You have 2 symmetrical bumps.
Emily had been in the dungeon for half a month, but she hadn't been idle. She had already figured out the layout and the guards' shifts. That night, she finally slipped out. She found a dog hole and crawled through it, only to see a pair of gold-trimmed boots waiting for her.
Dear disciple, what a coincidence. You like to come here for a stroll too?
Yes, Master. Where are you planning to go? Are you going to leave me behind again? You haven't changed a bit over the years.
Emily admitted defeat and turned to crawl back through the dog hole, but her well-fed figure from the past half-month made her too plump to fit. She wriggled frantically but couldn't move in or out. Suddenly, a bonfire lit up nearby, and footsteps approached. The dungeon guards had discovered her escape and were now searching for her. Seeing the situation, John quickly pulled Emily out. The area was open, with only a stable nearby for hiding. He pushed Emily inside and crouched down, covering his nose.
Don't move.
Emily stiffened, not daring to move. After a while, she realized a brown horse was backing up to relieve itself. With a plop, a murky object landed squarely on John's back.
What was that noise?
The search party paused, their eyes on the stable. The 2 held their breath, not daring to move. John had his hand on his sword, ready to fight.
It's too smelly. Little Brown must have an upset stomach again. Let's go.
The search party left, and the 2 remained motionless in the stable. Emily turned first, meeting John's eyes before quickly looking away. John removed his outer robe and stood up. Emily tried to stand but wobbled and fell into his arms.
My legs are numb.
She couldn't help but marvel at how much her foolish disciple had grown in 3 years. He was now much taller than her, and she barely reached his shoulder. Who knew that even with sparse meals, he could grow so tall? His genes were indeed remarkable. Lost in thought, she suddenly felt herself lifted. Her foolish disciple had picked her up effortlessly and leaped out of the stable. She adjusted her position, finding it quite comfortable in his arms.
Where are you taking me?
What, do you want to go back to that dreadful place and suffer?
I wasn't suffering. In the dungeon, I ate well and slept well. 3 dishes and a soup every meal, nutritious and delicious, with a soft silk quilt. By the way, dear disciple, the dungeon food tasted a lot like your cooking. You should try it someday.
John's forehead veins bulged. How had his master's brain regressed so much in 3 years? Maybe it wasn't too late to find a new master?
Master, what would you do without me?
His voice was hoarse and urgent, but just as he was about to approach, Emily pushed him away and vomited.
Don't come near me, you smell awful. Ugh.
Emily soaked in the wooden tub, enjoying a good bath. Nearby, John didn't dare to look at her once.
If it wasn't Master in the bath just now, but a nice girl from another family, you could have peeked, my good disciple.
Melie sighed deeply, patting John's shoulder. It's my fault. I taught you all sorts of sneaky tricks, but forgot to teach you this.
She looked at John with sympathy, as if saying, young man, you haven't even held a girl's hand, have you?
They both stared at the only bed in the room, motionless. The next second, they simultaneously rushed towards it.
Get off! Competing with Master for the bed? Do you have no respect?
Own, clutching the blanket and gripping the bed edge, retorted. Humph. You, who abandoned me in a crisis, dare to call yourself my master?
I'll sleep on the floor. You take the bed.
Melie nodded, showing a kind smile. But in the middle of the night, she suddenly felt restricted. Opening her eyes groggily, she was startled to find John in the bed.
What the heck? Why are you in the bed?
Own, now fully awake, glared at her. The floor is too hard. I can't sleep.
Who allowed you in the bed, you liar?
Master, have you forgotten who deceived me back then?
Emily was rendered speechless, silently moving to the other side of the bed to put as much distance between them as possible. But as they slept, they somehow ended up under the same blanket. John's arm and leg were draped over Emily. Even with her thick skin, Emily couldn't help but feel flustered. She grabbed his hand, intending to push him away, but then heard him mumble in his sleep.
Master, don't leave. Don't abandon me.
Emily's heart clenched, filled with a bittersweet feeling. She sighed and instead of pushing him away, she gently patted his hand, comforting him as she did when he was younger. John's emotions gradually stabilized. He suddenly pulled Emily into his arms, their bodies pressed together, sharing warmth. It was reminiscent of 3 years ago on Tianma Mountain, when they were each other's only support and hope in the cold and hunger. Emily was stunned, trembling, but this time she didn't push him away.
Master, I caught you.
The next morning, it was unclear who screamed first, but both of them fell out of bed. The maid outside heard the commotion and rushed in, followed by another person Emily recognized, the gorgeous woman who had whipped her in the dungeon.
You too?
Owen turned his head and almost fainted. Emily had somehow grown a beard, making it look like he was entangled with a man. No wonder the expressions of those outside were so colorful.
You might not believe this, but it's actually a misunderstanding.
The maid looked at Lily with a mix of pity and amusement, then closed the door, saying considerately,
Young master, it's still early. You can continue.
To avoid exposing her identity, Emily had quickly disguised herself as a man before the door opened. She was quite pleased with her disguise skills, unaware that within a day, the martial arts world was abuzz with gossip about John and her. Why has handsome John avoided women for 3 years, claiming his heart is already taken? Martial arts gossip exclusive interview reveals, according to an anonymous renowned female hero, it's because he's interested in men. Emily ignored John's darkening face, laughing uncontrollably on the bed. Outside, the journalist took notes. In broad daylight, handsome John shamelessly cavorts with a man in his room, laughter hinting at untold stories. John sensed someone outside and knocked the door down with a palm strike, his eyes blazing.
Hand it over.
But the journalist, dedicated to his profession, continued writing.
Exposed, handsome John resorts to threats. Is this anger from being found out, or a coy act in front of his beloved? The investigation continues.
Emily, enjoying the spectacle, suddenly recognized the journalist. She slapped her thigh in realization. This was the Good Samaritan who had given her meat buns on Tianma Mountain.
Benefactor, whether it's John's dark past or his rise to power, I'll help you uncover it all.
Actually, I just want John and your love story.
By the lake, two figures bent over to feed the koi fish. Emily gently wiped John's sweat with her sleeve, smiling sweetly.
The weather is dry. Are you exhausted?
It's nothing. With you by my side, I feel refreshed and don't notice the heat at all.
His eyes were filled with unmistakable affection, so open and unreserved that it made Emily's heart skip a beat, momentarily freezing her actions.
Cut! Next scene.
Emily stepped forward and patted John's shoulder, praising him.
Foolish disciple, you did well in the performance just now.
Do you think I was just acting?
Emily opened her mouth but was speechless, watching helplessly as the young man stormed off in a huff. For the next few days, Emily was confined to her room, heavily guarded, with no one allowed near. During the day, John was nowhere to be seen. Only at night would he appear, looking exhausted, and dive into bed with his eyes closed. But every time, his long arm would accurately pull Emily into his embrace. He slept soundly, but Emily lay wide-eyed, staring at him as if trying to etch his face into her bones.
Foolish disciple, it's not the first time I've lied to you, yet you still believe such nonsense about staying. You're truly a hopeless fool.
The day Emily escaped from John's side, the entire John residence was shrouded in a terrifying atmosphere, growing stronger the closer one got to young Master John's quarters. John sat at the head seat, his eyes dark and menacing.
I was truly foolish to believe that liar. Fine, very fine.
With a twisted smile, the jade cup in his palm shattered.
Master, let's see how you escape my grasp next time we meet.
Surprisingly, the next meeting came sooner than expected. The person John had turned the entire martial world upside down to find had come to him voluntarily. That day, after days of continuous rain, the sky finally cleared. Outside young Master John's courtyard, a figure in a long dress approached gracefully with the wind. John's previously cold eyes changed dramatically as he stared at the approaching figure. Finally, he sneered.
Master, have you lost your mind? How dare you walk into a trap?
Emily, usually dressed as a martial hero, now wore a long dress, presenting a different kind of elegance that almost made John lose himself. The woman raised her delicate hand, and a sealed letter fell at the young man's feet.
Young master, you misunderstand. I am now an aide to the great hero George, here merely to convey his orders.
Perhaps it was her indifferent tone that stung John. He suddenly stood up, like a beast with its fur bristling, and grabbed Emily's neck, squeezing hard.
If I want you gone, it doesn't matter who you cling to.
His fingers tightened, making it hard for Emily to breathe.
Killing me. George wouldn't allow it.
John seemed to hear the biggest joke, and indeed let go, throwing her aside.
Kill you? That would be too easy.
John stepped forward, smiling wickedly.
I'll just ask my dear father to hand you over. Do you think he would agree?
Emily was stunned. When she spoke again, her voice was cold and resolute.
Of course, if you want my lifeless body.
John was shocked, his body stiffening as he released his grip. George's decision to bring Emily into his fold was undoubtedly the right one. She came from the demonic cult, ruthless and leaving no trace in her actions, making her the perfect hidden blade for a righteous hero. In just 3 months, she had steadily advanced, becoming George's right-hand person, earning his deep trust.
Month later, an unprecedented grand event in the martial world was set to take place. That day would mark George's inauguration as the new leader, and it was also a significant moment. After relentless pursuit, the martial arts manual stolen 3 years ago had finally been recovered. To demonstrate the leader's benevolence, George made a shocking decision. On the day of his inauguration, he would reveal the coveted manual to the public, allowing everyone to read it.
The long-awaited day finally arrived. George, with steady steps, ascended to the supreme throne atop the mountain, under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Emily followed closely, taking her seat at the head, envied by many. The ceremony concluded, and it was time for the highlight of the day, the reappearance of the martial arts manual. With a wave of George's hand, the crowd parted, and a carriage covered with a black curtain creaked as it slowly approached. The carriage stopped, the curtain was lifted, and the world fell silent, so quiet that a pin drop could be heard. Inside the carriage was not a treasure chest, but a person, George's only son, John, who had once dominated the martial world. The crowd exchanged puzzled glances.
As many of you may know, 20 years ago, the George family's mechanism skills were unparalleled. The martial arts manual was hidden in a mechanism box that no one can open now.
Is there really no way?
Well, there is a way.
Countless eyes focused on him. He continued.
Only the blood of the George family can forcibly open the box.
In other words, opening the box would mean John's demise.
I, George, am willing to be the villain for the sake of everyone's shared desire.
His words shocked everyone. George was willing to sacrifice his son for the manual. In the past, such an act would have been condemned as even a tiger doesn't eat its cubs. But now, with his promise to reveal the manual to the public, anyone opposing him would be seen as going against the world. As expected, though shocked, the crowd was more thrilled and excited, with many stepping forward to praise George's noble act. Even Emily showed no extra emotion from start to finish. She looked down at the boy in the prison cart, his fine clothes now in tatters, looking pitiful. As the executioner approached with a knife to draw the boy's blood, she slowly stood up and spoke.
Wait, as his master, I want to do it myself.
Emily drew her sword, her step slow and heavy on the stone steps.
Foolish disciple, did you ever think you'd meet your end at your master's hands?
John looked at her deeply, saying nothing. The long sword flew from her hand at a sharp angle, but at the last moment, it twisted in midair, aiming directly at George, who was seated at the head. He tried to block it, but his hand was already bruised and powerless. The blade pierced straight through his heart, bringing forth a splash of crimson.
Have you all forgotten that George also bears the surname John?
At Emily's reminder, everyone rushed to catch the blood spilling from George's chest, no longer caring about John's fate. Emily slashed open the prison cart, breaking the chains that bound him.
Go.
John didn't move.
She suddenly raised her head, her eyes bloodshot, and struck his chest with her palm. I said, go.
John staggered back but quickly stepped forward, grabbing her wrist.
Let's go together.
Emily was taken aback, her facade of strength finally crumbling. She touched the now mature face of the young man and softly agreed.
All right.
Before the smile could fully bloom on his face, a wave of dizziness overcame him. His eyes filled with disbelief, but he couldn't support his weakening body and collapsed. Even now, he had been so certain that his deceitful master genuinely wanted to leave with him. She had deceived him, time and again. He had believed her, giving his all. From the dense forest behind, a group of guards emerged, taking the fallen John away, while Emily turned to gaze at George's corpse on the high seat. She knew that beneath the Supreme Leader's throne lay the chest containing the secret manual, and it wouldn't be long before someone found it. She knew that beneath this mountain was a bottomless abyss, filled with toxic miasma, a place no one had ever ventured. She also knew that George was not of the John bloodline, merely an adopted orphan. Unable to learn the family's secret techniques, he had harbored resentment and conspired with enemies to attack the John residence, leaving the young John as the sole survivor. Therefore, his blood could never open the mechanism box. From the beginning, only John's blood could open the box. As long as the box remained intact, John would never have peace. The tension between master and disciple reached its peak.
Foolish disciple, drop the bundle.
I won't. Those are master's things, and the things master gave me. I won't drop them.
The martial artists were closing in from behind, their shadows growing ominously. Time was slipping away.
John, we have to go now.
No. Master, you promised you wouldn't leave me behind again.
Emily glanced at the struggling John, her eyes filled with sorrow and determination. She gritted her teeth and struck his abdomen. John fell straight from the eaves, unable to resist. The shock and despair in his eyes were heart-wrenching, but he spoke each word clearly.
Master, you lied to me!